This is the Recruit the Employer podcast, and you're listening to episode 99, How to Figure Out If a Company Actually Has a Good Culture. Welcome to the Recruit the Employer podcast, a show for the ambitious, action-oriented career woman who wants to live out her purpose, rise to the top of her industry, and be seen as a leader at work. In 30 minutes or less, we'll walk you through the latest strategies to land your dream job, blast through imposter syndrome, and make the money you deserve. I'm your host, Jena ex-Wall Streeter turned career coach and founder of Recruit the Employer. But more importantly, I'm on a mission to help you fall in love with your work again. So grab a glass of wine, get ready to be coached, and tune in to your weekly boost of career confidence. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Recruit the Employer podcast. I'm your host, Jena, and we have had a couple of weeks of hiatus. We've been busy on our end and kind of wanted to put a gap in between our seasons. So welcome to season 6. This is the season which is one of my work wins, where we have our 100th episode next week. You do not want to miss it. So make sure that you are subscribed to this podcast. It's a really special one. I actually brought on my friend Elizabeth McCravey to interview me, to do a little bit of a flip the mic situation. And I'm just really excited about the episode and what we talk about. And it's a subject matter that I am really passionate about, that I haven't done a ton of episodes on. Actually, I don't think really any, fully dedicated to the subject. So I want to see you next week for the 100th episode. And if you've been listening for a long time, I would just love if you would go over to your iTunes and that you would just give us a review, a 5-star review. We would be so honored if you did that. We've been getting a ton of reviews lately, and we love getting to see those. The other thing that I want you to do is I want you to mark your calendars. Mark your calendars, not just for next week for the 100th episode of Recruit the Employer, but for May 4th, because that is the release date. I actually physically right now have in my hands a copy of the Career Map Journal. So if you are interested in getting your hands on this journal, that's going to help you get clarity on your career, and it's going to help you understand what you're actually accomplishing on a week-to-week basis. It is what I call purse pocket sized. So it's smaller than a big, huge journal that's going to weigh a lot, that you're not going to want to carry around. It's a beautiful color. The inside's so great, easy to write on. I'm holding it right now. I'm just so excited to be sharing it with you. So if you want, we only have a small run of this. So we kind of did a beta test for this, and I'm really happy with how the product turned out. We did a very small run. So we only have 1,000 copies that we are selling, which sounds like a lot, but we've already got a ton of interest in it. So the best way to get a copy of this is to head on over to recruittheemployer.com/waitlist to be the first to find out when they are released. So we're actually going to, a couple days before the release date on May 4th to the public, we are releasing to our email list those people who want to get an early bird copy. So you want to get on that list in order to be aware of when the Career Map Journal officially can get into your hands. So I am so grateful to the team that kind of pulled that together, and for some other folks that are helping us kind of launch this. I'll probably do a whole episode on what I learned from creating a physical product, because 1, anybody can do it. And 2, it's really fun actually to hold something. Most of my products or services that we've produced have all been digital, right? Every single one that we've done has been digital. I did sell cards for a certain short period of time, but this was really fun to build out, to dream about, and to have it come to fruition. So thank you to all of you who affirmed me and told me, yes, you absolutely need to create this journal. I've been waiting for one. Well, we have it for you. It's in my hands right now. It's going to be in yours May 4th. To purchase for the regular public. And if you head to recruittheemployer.com/waitlist, you'll be able to get that. So talking a little bit about, before we hop into talking through what it actually looks like to have a good culture in a company and what to look for and how to figure out if a company is lying to you or telling you the truth, I do want to share with you one of the reviews that we've gotten recently. And I just want to read this to you. One, again, we love getting reviews. It helps us realize the impact that we're making towards people. We get messages on LinkedIn all the time. And so if this podcast is impacting you in some way, shape, or form, the best way to show us some love is to go on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. But here's the review we recently got. Jena clearly has a passion to help others grow their career and networking strategies. Her enthusiasm shines through in her podcast episodes. I love how she shares great examples, relatable stories, and offers practical, doable, today advice to help listeners level up their career strategies. She takes the daunting tasks and helps shift the mindset that this journey can be fun and rewarding. Well, thank you so much for whoever posted that. You know, those names of people are so odd. Thank you so much for posting that. I am passionate about providing practical, doable, take some action today steps. And today is going to be one of those episodes, right? So whether or not you are actively looking for a role or you're, pondering what the next opportunity is, or just wondering how you got into a company where they're not actually following through on the culture that they promise, this episode is really, really going to be for you. So if you've ever gone to, through an interview and you're really wondering, is this legit? Or are they faking it, right? All of those questions that you may be having, this episode's really going to help you. I'm going to give you 3 steps to understand and get to the bottom how to figure out if a company actually has a good culture or not. Before we get into those steps, though, I want to talk briefly about what it actually looks like in the recruiting landscape nowadays. When I was working at the Muse, we were an employer branding company. We were a career advice site, but also an employer branding company. We helped companies understand what their value proposition was and then showcase that on the company pages. If you go to the Muse right now, you can see what it looks like to work inside of an organization. This is big business, friends. Big business. And it's something that employers are paying more and more attention to is this term called employer branding. And it sounds exactly like what it sounds like. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is employers branding their company cultures. So no longer is talent acquisition just about finding the right person. It's really around how do we market ourselves and our culture and our company so that we can sell people on what it looks like to work here. And some of that comes across as a little offensive, right? We can get into a company and we're like, that was a bag of tricks that they totally lied to us, right? I hear that happen all the time. And so I've had a client recently where she was like, I thought the company culture was going to be this way. And then I actually got in and the team was really dysfunctional and nobody really lives by those values or that vision or that mission. And I don't want to be a part of another company. So how do I get out of this company, but not make the same mistake again? So what often happens is the person just stays at the really crappy company because they're so scared that what they're being told is a lie. So let me just first start by saying you will never 100% truly understand what it looks like to work at a company until you work for them. However, there are things that we can do to help you mitigate any risk and to really ask the hard questions and get down to what really matters to you in order to understand what is that culture like and to have that mindset and have that authority. So another stat around employer branding I thought was really interesting. I found this in an HBR article, but companies will spend upwards of $350,000 on employer branding alone. That's not like job boards. That's not, there's a ton of things that go into talent acquisition. That's just on branding the company, whether it's videos, whether it's having a, buffed up and pretty looking LinkedIn profile, whether it's creating culture initiatives, whatever it may look like. They spend a lot of money on marketing to you, their company, right? And some companies are truthful. They definitely are. And some companies are not. And I think it's important for us to identify that there is a difference between a company culture and a subculture of a company. So a company could have an overarching vision and mission of the organization, but if you actually get down to the department level, certain departments live that out and other departments don't live that out. Because newsflash, you're working not for departments, you're working for people, right? You're not just working for departments, you're working for people. A company is an entity made up of a bunch of different people. So if the people you're directly working with don't ascribe to the culture of the broader company, you're kind of up a creek without a paddle, right? So it's really important to identify what's the main culture vibe that I'm getting for the company as a whole. And we're going to get into how to figure that out. And then also at the same time, drilling down a little bit deeper and understanding what is the subculture of the department that I'm trying to be hired into. Okay. So we do need to divide those things in order to more effectively and efficiently understand if a company has a good culture. So we're going to start with step one. Okay. This first step to figure out if a company actually has a good culture. Step one is understanding what you find valuable. Now, this may seem really obvious, but like, yeah, I want a company with a great culture, but what does that mean to you? Right? I've worked with tons of clients and they all have a different answer to that question. Some people say, I want to work for a big company because that culture is really conducive to upward mobility. There's a lot of structure there. I thrive in that type of culture. Other people are like, I don't want to be a part of a corporate structure because there's so much red tape. I need to be a part of a startup because of XYZ factors of their culture. When I was transitioning to out of the New York Stock Exchange, when I was evaluating different companies, I really was looking. I've told this story many times before, but there was one company that was a little bit more corporate. I would have to wear, business casual every day. It was a bunch of ex-bankers. It was a kind of a stuffy environment. And I felt like I was dying there, right? It actually was important to me, more important to me that the environment and the people that I was working with were, we could relate to each other personally. I didn't feel like I had to show up as some version of myself that I wasn't. And it was a place that at that time in my life, I didn't want that vibe, though they were going to pay me more money, right? So that from a culture perspective, they had a lot of things that were valuable to the outside eye, but nothing that I personally wanted. Meanwhile, over here, there was this small company that was female-led. That was really important to me at the time. I was able to wear casual clothes. I had unlimited vacation, and it was a startup culture that was the environment itself had a lot of really intelligent, scrappy people that were really going forward and all in on the mission. And that was really important to me. So for me, some of you may be listening and I get clients who are across the spectrum, right? I get some clients who are like, I don't want anything to do with a startup because it's too risky. And there's, the whole startup tech vibe is just so annoying these days, right? You've got to figure out for yourself what is most important. If you do not know what is most important to you, I would recommend getting the Career Map Journal because there are prompted questions in there to help you work through and help you think about what do I want? What does culture mean to me? Because it's going to be different from person to person. So that is step one in understanding if a company actually has good culture is understanding what good culture means to you. So that's step one. Step two is to do your research. Okay. So this may seem obvious, right? But a lot of people are like, okay, well, how do I do research? Couple of sites that I recommend that probably are ones that you're familiar with. I would recommend looking at Glassdoor and looking at reviews. We'll talk about how to evaluate which reviews are helpful and which reviews are not. I would check out The Muse. So I mentioned that before. The Muse is a really great resource to actually watch people talk about their experience at a company. You can physically see inside the organization of what the space looks like. You can have an understanding of what their goals and their mission are. And you're going to know what feels good and what doesn't feel good with what your goals are. So do your research. Those are the best places to start as external third-party resources. Now, what I will say is these places, like a Glassdoor or the Muse, often get paid by the companies to help curate the experience and what it looks like to work there. Now, they're not inauthentic, right? But they are going to make it look better than it probably actually is on a day-to-day basis, right? Not everything is sunshine and rainbows and unicorns all the time. We know that, right? I wouldn't have a job if it was. So with Glassdoor too, you need to just be a little bit aware of what is the information that you're consuming and is there a regular theme, right? We all know that there are trolls. You're more likely to have people give a negative review than a positive review. So when you're reading the negative reviews, just ask yourself, like, are there themes that I'm seeing? If there are themes that's something negative, right? Maybe perhaps I want to pay attention to that, ask about it in an interview, or maybe it's like a non-negotiable, no, thank you very much. I already dealt with that before. No need to do that again, right? Okay, so do that. The other thing that I would recommend doing is doing a little bit of research on LinkedIn. So I would see if you can find somebody that works for that company that maybe right? Networking is key here, right? Find somebody that you potentially know that works for that company or has worked for that company that would give you an honest perspective on what it looks like to work there. If you don't have somebody that you know and you trust, what I would recommend is potentially, this is going to be a little bit harder to find, but it is possible, right? Is to go and see and kind of search around on LinkedIn for people that used to work at the company and who left and moved on to something else. And then one of the ways that you can do that, it's really hard to do that kind of verbally explaining to you, but you can go to the company's LinkedIn page, scroll down to people and search for different titles. And you may pop up with somebody that's currently at the role most often, but you also will find people that in the past have worked for the company. So you can do some filters to help figure that out. And you could reach out to somebody and say, hey, I know this is super random. We've never met before, but I noticed that you worked at XYZ company. I'm interviewing with them. Culture is really important to me. No pressure. But if you'd be willing to hop on the phone, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience and potentially why you left if you feel comfortable. Obviously, this stays between you and I. Now, will somebody always respond to that? Maybe, maybe not, right? They're more likely to have a phone call about it than they are to actually write it in a LinkedIn message. But it's an option that you can take to reach out to somebody. I would love if somebody that's listening to this podcast right now tries that and then tell me what the response was. I've had a couple of clients do this to some success. It is not always successful, but it is an avenue for you to try and kind of check off on your list. Hey, I tried everything I could to get to the bottom of whether this is going to be a really good company for me. So really understanding and doing your research. The other thing that you want to pay attention to is the company's page, right? So the company's website itself could have a lot of information about initiatives, organizations within the organization that you could get involved with, understanding what opportunities look like. There's some companies that I recommend and I think actually have really, really great cultures from everyone that I've heard that works there. Buffer is a really great company. They have an open platform where they talk about their culture. Open platform blog where they talk about their culture. They also provide and are very open about their salaries. They give a transparent formula and showcases what their salary looks like, right? They're really, really great. There's another organization that Zappos actually back in the day, I don't know if they still do this, but at some point they would require you to everybody to do the exact same training as a call center rep first, no matter what your job was. I love that because it really showcases that they care about their customers, one, and two, they really want everybody to start with the same playing field and then to go into their position. So I would say for yourself, it's really understanding you can do research. You could literally take the company's name and hit, let's say Google culture or Dropbox culture or Facebook's culture and get a good idea of what it actually looks like. It's so funny. I had so many people that were like, oh my gosh, Facebook, I just want to work for Facebook, or oh my gosh, I just want to work for Amazon. And now there's all these things coming out about how they do not treat their employees very well, right? More so Amazon than Facebook. But you hear these stories, and if you do some research on it, you're going to be able to find some things and understand why did people say that it's a bad culture? And is it actually a subculture problem, or is it, a generic, this is a problem, right, thing that's going on in the company? Or is it something that you just don't care about and you're fine with it being that issue, right? So you've got to decide again for yourself, what are the values? And step 2 is doing your own research. Step 3 on how to figure out if a company actually has a good culture is that when you get into the interview process, right, there's only so much that you can do pre-interview. You can kind of filter out to the best of your capabilities. You can look on those sites like the Muse, Glassdoor. You can go to another website I forgot to mention was B Corp, where it shows companies that go through a very rigorous certification process to get B Corp status. They are for planet, for profit, and for people companies. So it's a special kind of tax benefit they get. And then generally speaking, those companies care about their people, right? So those are some great ways to do some external research. Now, the really important piece to figuring out if a company has good culture is when you actually get into the interview. So no longer, and this is where your mindset comes into play. This is where confidence comes into play. This is where if you don't really believe you have something to offer, you're not going to show up and ask these questions because you're just going to have like a please hire me approach, right? We've talked about that on a zillion different episodes, but I feel like it's important to reiterate, right? So you have to ask a lot of questions in an interview. Your goal should not just be to get an offer. Okay, let me repeat that again. Your goal is not just to get an offer. You are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. And this is where you can really dig into the culture versus subculture. The worst question that you can ask, and I hope that no one that's listening to this podcast does this because you know better. Never ask, so what's the culture like? Or what do you like about the culture? Those are bland, generic, vanilla questions that are going to give you no information to help you figure out and discern, is this the right company for me? You need to ask pointed, strategic questions to get to the bottom of what the culture actually is like on a day-to-day basis, if the promises are true. Okay, here's a couple of questions that you can ask. So if you are sitting down somewhere, this is where you can write these down. I would ask somebody, what's one thing that you would change about the culture here? It's a great question to ask, right? So it's not letting them off the hook, right? It's not saying, okay, well, what do you love about working here? Why do you love it? Like, those are all fine questions, but they're so boring. They're not going to help you understand anything. Asking a question, what's one thing that you would change about the culture, is not aggressive, but it's being curious, right? It's being very curious. Another question that you could ask is, I noticed on your website that your team is involved in XYZ initiative. How does that play out on a weekly or a monthly or a yearly basis? Like, what does that actually look like? So this is for companies that maybe are a little bit bigger and they have initiatives that they market on, in their employer branding on their website. We have a women's and diversity group that we promote. Okay, you say you promote that. What does that actually look like, right? Getting specifics on how that plays out and if they're really actually doing what they said that they're doing, or if they're just checking a box to say that they do something, right? Another way that you could ask to kind of get a good idea of the subculture, because ultimately the culture of the company matters, the overall culture matters, because I do believe that whatever happens at the top trickles down to the, middle managers and then ultimately to the bottom. And so I do think that ultimate, big global picture of culture matters. However, I do think that what matters more is the team that you're going to be on. Okay. The team that you're going to be on. That is really, really what matters. Do you like the people that you're going to be talking to? Right? Do you respect the manager? Can you tell that you respect the manager? Are you getting any weird discerning vibes from him or her? Right? What are the things that you are noticing as you're having conversations? So one question that you could ask a leader, a manager, is saying, how would you describe your leadership style? You're going to get a lot of ideas of how that person describes their leadership style. If they can describe it, succinctly, it's going to give you an idea. Another question that you could ask for, the team members that you're going to be talking with is saying, how would you describe our manager, my potential manager, in 3 words? What would be 3 words that you would use to describe the manager? That gives you a good idea of the respect that person has for somebody else, right? So I can think of somebody that I worked with that I really, really respected. It would be not hard for me to come up with 3 really great adjectives for that person. Now, if it was somebody that I didn't really get along with, right, I would not be able to hide that. I couldn't be able to make something up. And my answers probably would be pretty obvious that it wasn't great. Okay. So that's a way to ask it in a non-aggressive way, but really get to understand, like, what's the dynamic on this team look like, right? Another thing that you could do, and this is where context really matters, is not to put asking the question, not to put a salt in the wound, but I noticed on your Glassdoor page, there were a lot of reviews that talked about, XYZ thing at the company. I know that Glassdoor typically is a place where people air their grievances, but since I saw it a couple times, I did want to talk about, do you see that as being relevant? And if so, what's the company doing to remedy XYZ issue? Or if you have a specific question like, what does progression look like at the company and how is that evaluated? The reason why I'm asking that question is because at my last company, they said that they were interested in promoting people, but they really had no pathway to make sure that that happened. What does the company do here to make sure that we're being evaluated properly and having annual reviews, and at the same time being clear on what that career pathing looks like? Right? That question is really helpful for you to determine, do they actually have a career path? Do they actually care about the employee? And also, you providing context makes sure that they know you're not just putting them, in a corner, but you're really asking them thoughtfully because of your past experience and giving them an idea of, this is what I've dealt with before. I know somebody who was interviewing with somebody who said, hey, I know this is kind of awkward, but I really need to understand, what do the hours look like? It's not that I'm not willing to work hard. It's not that I'm not willing to get things done, but because of my past experience working 80 hours a week, I'm not interested in working that anymore. So if that's what this role is, I totally respect that, but it's probably not the best fit for me, right? That type of question If you ask a question like that, right? A lot of us are wondering that, right? Is this going to be good for my work-life balance and mental health? Asking questions like that, and what that type of question produces is an authority and a confidence that I know that I don't necessarily need this job, but I want this job and I want it to be the right fit, right? So a lot of people, and this goes back to confidence and mindset and what we're talking about, is your goal shouldn't just be to have the offer. Your goal should be to see, is this a strategic career move for me where I'm going to thrive and be my best self and be a part of a really great culture of people, not great company culture, a great culture of people, and see if this is a good fit for me. And asking a question like, hey, I just want to be transparent. I've been at a company where I had to work 80 hours a week. I'm not interested in that again. Can you just be straight with me about what hours and expectations look like? Because I think expectations are important to identify even before hopping onto a company, right? That type of question is going to show authority. It's going to show leadership. It's going to show power, and it's going to show confidence in what your capabilities are and what you come and offer to an organization. That is a very bold question, but I have found that when clients ask that question and provide context to why they ask it, it's really, really powerful. And they get the answers to the questions that they actually care about, right? They get the answers to the questions that they actually care about. So those are the 3 steps. It's pretty simple. It does not have to be rocket science, but you do have to pull on your confidence. You do have to be willing to do some reflection, right? You do have to be putting some work in to do pre-interview and during the interview to ask the right questions. And the right questions are going to be based off of what that reflection is, right? So if you don't do the reflecting part, by the time you get, asked the question, what questions do you have for me in an interview, you're really not going to know what you want to know. And so when I get clients for interview prep and they say, well, what questions should I ask the employer? I said, what do you want to know? Those are the questions that you should be asking. It's not about what are the right questions, or like, what are the questions that you want to know? It's changing your mindset around what value you can bring to the table, why you deserve to know the answers to these questions. And at the end of the day, you're serving the company by asking those thoughtful questions because you want to be a part of a company that's going to, invest in you as much as you're investing in them, because you're going to stay there longer. It's going to be less expensive for the company, and you're going to be willing to work really hard. So all three of those three things considered. If you do that, step 1, understand your values. I recommend buying the Career Map Journal just because it's going to help you process through and ask those thoughtful questions. Step 2 is doing your research externally to see what the company really is about. If you can talk to somebody internally at the company that used to work there and left, or somebody that works there to give you an honest review of the organization, that would be great. And then step 3 is your responsibility. It's you asking a lot of questions in an interview to get to the bottom and get the answers for the questions you really care about. Don't be fearful, be excited, and be encouraged that it is possible to figure out if a company actually has good culture. I used all 3 of these when I was making a transition out of the New York Stock Exchange and into another organization. And I was very pleasantly surprised with the type of culture that I found at the Muse and then on the subculture of the sales team. I couldn't have been happier. And it was because I asked really hard questions and also got really clear for myself on what I wanted, which helped me realize that the other company maybe had good culture for other people, but did not have a really great culture for me. And that was okay. So I just want to encourage you this week that if you have some interviews coming up, go through this process, right? Think through, what are the values that I have? What's the research I can do? And what questions can I ask to make sure that I understand if this company actually has a good culture? All right, folks, I will see you next week for the 100th episode of the Recruit the Employer podcast. Thanks for listening to the Recruit the Employer podcast. If you've been loving this podcast and it's been helping you approach your career in a brand new way, I have 2 shameless asks. Number 1, make sure you hit subscribe right this very second. That way you won't miss a single episode. And number 2, would you give us a review? Reviews help other ambitious career women like you know that this podcast is the place to be and helps the podcast climb to the top of the charts. Think of it as some good career karma. And as always, if you want to learn more about the topics we discussed today or are ready to take massive action and invest in yourself and your career, we would be honored to help you. Head on over to recruittheemployer.com/call to book your free strategy session. Regardless, we will see you next week.